It is President Trump's first full day in office, and he has already taken significant action to shape the future of the next 4 years in office. President Trump issued 42 executive orders, memoranda, and proclamations, including new border security measures and the pardoning of nearly 1,500 participants in the January 6 riots. He also issued an additional 115 personal actions and more than 200 executive actions. Now, among the executive actions President Trump signed on day one, he declared a national emergency at the border and is tasking the U.S. military with enforcing border restrictions. The executive orders follow Trump's promises on the campaign trail to issue mass deportations on day one. I want to bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Camilo, good to see you as always. So changes to the system have already begun, including the cancellation of that CBP One app, that government app that asylum seekers use to submit their information to make an appointment. And you have some news to break regarding this.
That's right. We estimate that there were around 270,000 migrants who were waiting for this appointment-based system in Mexico when it was halted by the new Trump administration. And so these tens of thousands of migrants are now stranded in Mexico. Many of them are not from Mexico. Many of them are Haitian, Venezuelan, and from countries across the Western Hemisphere. And so the question now is, what happens to their cases? And the concern among some officials, Lindsay, is that some of these migrants, because they're growing increasingly desperate, may decide to attempt to cross into the U.S. illegally, which, of course, was the intended factor here. It was designed, this policy was designed, Lindsay, to prevent people from crossing into the country illegally. The other news we can share is that a federal judge has also ordered an emergency hearing as it relates to the shutting down of this program. The ACLU is arguing now in federal court that the shutting down of this application system, Lindsay, basically has ended asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border.
Can you elaborate on that? What impact has the stoppage of the app had?
Well, this was really the main gateway into the U.S. asylum system under the Biden administration. As you may recall, in June, President Biden, just before the election, issued a sweeping executive order that basically disqualified most migrants entering the country illegally from asylum. But there was one key exemption to that order, and that was CBP One. Under this application, migrants could schedule an appointment to be processed in an orderly, legal, and safe way at official border crossings and be exempted from that asylum regulation that President Biden issued. So that was really the main exemption to that ban on asylum claims. But now the Trump administration has categorically shut that down. And so right now, the people who had appointments, now those appointments have been canceled. And the people who didn't have appointments, there's no longer a way for them to be processed at official border crossings so they can start the asylum process, Lindsay.
My next question for you is going to be a twofer. What did President Trump say, then candidate Trump say on the campaign trail about this particular app that help us understand why it was shut down on day one? And what can you tell us about the changes that he made in regards to birthright citizenship?
Well, President Trump, Lindsay, argued that this phone app was essentially a service that facilitated or rewarded illegal immigration because he and other Republicans have argued that the Biden administration incentivized people to cross the border either illegally or through this app by setting up these programs, and that this application allowed people who otherwise would not be eligible to come here legally to enter the country, and they were very much opposed to that. They believe that that was an overreach of executive authority on immigration. As it relates to your question on birthright citizenship, the president issued a sweeping executive action yesterday that attempts to upend the longstanding interpretation of the Constitution, which has been that it means that people who are born here on U.S. soil are automatically U.S. citizens. He is now ordering federal agencies, Lindsay, to direct officials to deny citizenship to the children of parents who are in the country illegally or parents who are on temporary visas here, such as tourists. So this is a huge change, but we have to underscore that this will be litigated in federal courts. In fact, the ACLU and other advocates have filed suit in federal district court, and so have a coalition of Democratic-led states. So this will be decided by the federal court system.
Camilo, what are we hearing in terms of potential ICE raids? We know last night in the Oval Office, the president was asked about it, and he said, I don't want to say when. He sort of wants to keep the element of surprise. What can you tell us about what some cities around the country are expecting? And what is the border czar Tom Homan saying also about impending mass deportations?
Well, of course, President Trump and border czar Tom Homan have talked about the idea that they want to oversee the largest deportation campaign in American history, and they have been promising mass deportations over the past 2 years, really, since President Trump began his campaign for president the second time around. And right now, we do know that ICE field offices, according to sources rather, have been instructed to ramp up operations in sanctuary jurisdictions across the country to arrest, detain, and ultimately deport migrants who are in the country illegally, and to target those who have criminal histories. However, the big change now, the major shift now in policy, Lindsay, is that even though ICE will still focus on arresting unauthorized immigrants who have criminal records, convictions, or charges, they can now also arrest migrants who are simply in the country illegally without documents, but who are non-criminals. That was a policy that the Biden administration discontinued.
Camilo, Montoya-Galvez, thank you. Let's bring in CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang for more on this. So, Weijia, the dust has settled a bit. What will define day one? Is it these executive orders? Day one for President Trump? Is it pardons? What will have the biggest impact, you think, of what he signed yesterday?
Well, Lindsay, it's important to note that he signed 25 executive orders, but dozens and dozens more executive actions, more than 200. And that really sets the tone for his goals and agenda here. For some context, the first time around on day one, he only signed 2 executive actions in total. So this shows how much more organized he is, more experienced, and more confident. So I do think that the pardons that you mentioned are certainly a big deal and really defines the way that he views January 6th. And what is to be determined is how that could impact future political violence, which is something even Republicans are bringing up on Capitol Hill. And to be clear, only a few are speaking out against these pardons for now, at least publicly. You can see here on the screen, we're talking about 1,500 Capitol rioters, actually more than that, who were linked to the attacks on January 6th. And so, they do not have to serve their sentences in cases of commutations or, cases are dropped, essentially. And so that sets a really questionable precedent for what that means for potential violent crimes. And, as we've been reporting, he signed several other executive actions that have to do with his top campaign promises. Camilo just laid out the executive orders on immigration, but he also signed several what he calls common sense measures. For example, mandating on federal forms that there are only 2 genders, male and female. And so that is an example of, the sort of things that he's using on day one to define his presidency here.
Judge Aileen Cannon actually denied the Justice Department's request for members of Congress to have access to Volume 2 of former Special Counsel Jack Smith's final report into Trump's classified documents case. Volume 1 was into the alleged election interference case. What more can you tell us about the decision? Is the Trump administration responding?
They haven't responded yet, but I don't think, we would be surprised to hear that they believe this is the right decision because, they would argue that the case doesn't even matter because it has not moved forward. We know that Jack Smith is no longer at the Department of Justice, and Trump himself has railed against this investigation from day one. And so because we are talking about classified documents, it's no surprise that the judge ruled that it should not be released, even to members of Congress. And in her statement, she said because of the nature of this particular case and how much publicity it has gotten, she doesn't want to take the risk of something being leaked into the public because we're talking about such sensitive materials. But would not be surprised either if Trump himself does comment on this. But so far, we haven't heard yet, Lindsay.
Okay. Jiang, thank you.